Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Gaming News, where we discuss all things within the gaming industry. And today we have a couple of different topics for you. First is we're going to talk about EA and a couple of different things regarding that. Next, we're going to talk about Double Fine and PlayStation, although they're in the same category today because of the topic, and I just separated the banner to be both. Then we are going to talk about YouTube, and finally, we are going to talk about Skull and Bones, an upcoming game. So, with that said, let us get started. So the first topic that I would like to cover is EA. And EA is once again making some interesting headlines, and the first of which is that Kotaku on Monday released an article saying that EA is once again making a Lord of the Rings video game. Now, we know that previously EA has tried to make a Lord of the Rings video game, but was not very successful in that venture, and now they're going to try again. So it's not the most exciting topic when it comes to licensing, but the author of this article talks about the new Lord of the Rings game and what it's going to be. So first, they say that the bad news is that it's a free-to-play mobile game, but the good news is that it is based on one of the best types of free-to-play games around. And it's going to be called Lord of the Rings: Heroes of Middle-earth, and the official description is as follows. The Lord of the Rings: Heroes of Middle-earth will feature immersive storytelling, turn-based combat, deep collection systems, and a wide roster of characters from across the vast universe of The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. Players battle through iconic stories from the world of Tolkien and take up the fight against the great evils of Middle-earth. And this is exciting because who doesn't love a Lord of the Rings game? I personally am very excited to see what happens with a Lord of the Rings game. There have certainly been some games inspired by the Lord of the Rings, and being a big fan of the series in general, the books, the original Tolkien works, and the movies, I have been excited to see a video game that works really well in that universe, because it could certainly work really well if done properly. Now, do I think that EA is the right fit for this? Not really, especially when you consider that book to movie can be interesting depending on the book and depending on the movie and the rights that are signed off when you decide to go into mass media like a movie. And with video game licensing, again, we see a lot of hit and misses, mostly misses. The most recent one, of course, was the Fast and Furious video game, which I would have been really excited for because I'm a Fast and Furious fan, but the video game was just not there, and it takes a lot to really entice the video gaming audience into something. I feel like the Fast and Furious game would have been way more successful if it were, a clone of a GTA or something like that, where it's a little more open world. You could set up and design your own missions. Like, you could do a lot of really cool things in the Fast and Furious universe when you port to a video game. But unfortunately, that didn't quite happen. And in this case, I'm just incredibly worried about Lord of the Rings and the fact that it's EA that would be looking at this, especially since you're going to try and do a free-to-play mobile game, which is not the most exciting thing to me. Unless maybe you do like a Clash of Clans kind of thing, I could see myself really being interested in that. But again, it's EA, and I really don't know how I feel about them being the ones to have this IP and whether or not it's going to be successful. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. But that's not the only news coming out of EA that we have this week. As of the 13th, today, when I'm recording this, we have an NME article that is, what does the EA and FIFA split mean for fans of football games? Or in this case, it's soccer for us because we're in North America. And this is, I believe, an opinion piece, but there are some interesting key points to this article, which is that EA is parting ways with FIFA in order to enable it to deliver the world's biggest interactive sports experience for its growing community in collaboration with 300 plus partners across the world of football. Privately, I suspect a prohibitively expensive licensing deal and the alleged indelible stink of corruption that's followed the football organization for years may have propelled EA into action. So what this means is that EA's astonishingly successful footy franchise FIFA will be FIFA no more. Instead, you'll be playing EA Sports FC. I agree with the author of this in that that is the worst name. I know that we've covered information about EA and how they were probably splitting from the FIFA name, and that one of their biggest franchises is going to be affected in some capacity. So this is very much a follow-up. But like the author of this, the name is garbage. Please, for the love of God, EA, try to learn anything from the rest of the gaming industry, like learn to name shit well. We're not gonna be excited for, hey, I'm gonna play EA Sport FC because it makes me sound cooler. No, please, find a better name for the love of God. I don't care, just find a better name. However, more on the article. They say in here it's gone to great pains to express that the introduction of EA Sport FC will not impact any current EA Sports global football games, and the final FIFA installment, a game EA and FIFA jointly insist will be the greatest, most expansive FIFA ever, I'll believe it when I see it, will release later this year with more game modes, features, teams, leagues, players, and competitions than any previous edition. But after that, the companies will go their separate ways. Again, I'll believe it when I see it. I enjoy sports games. Sometimes it really depends on what it is, but in this particular case, I would be way more invested in playing the FIFA style games if it wasn't EA and if they weren't so anti-consumer and if they weren't a hot pile of garbage. And if you want to know how I feel about that, there was once a game review that was put out a few years back where it had some innovative options from the previous edition, and the following year the game that they released in the same franchise was terrible. It was literally a copy paste. They had screenshots in the review showing that they quite literally copied and pasted a lot of the assets into the newer version of the game, and they really didn't make anything better. And Angry Joe Show actually did a review of the game as well, if you want to take a look at that, and how much they really just did not do well with the franchise. And thus, I feel like FIFA was right to get away from EA, even though it would have been one of their greatest sellers. So now we're going to see, what does EA do from this point going forward? And the final bit that I want to cover with this article is that if FIFA makes good on its plans to diversify its partners and work with other developers, we should see a slew of different studios getting a stab at devising new footy games. So obviously, very excited for the future of the franchise. And Lastly, the final paragraph I wanted to include in here as well. It remains to be seen that they'll emulate FIFA's monstrously successful, if a tad stale, formula or develop something entirely unexpected. But the good news for football fans is that after 25 years, EA's stranglehold and its problematic preoccupation with microtransactions is finally coming to an end, meaning they can no longer just try to walk it in. Maybe, just maybe, this means they'll have to innovate. I agree with the author of this article. Maybe this will force a massive shift in the development of EA games and how they treat their consumer base, because they're not going to be able to rest on their laurels anymore. They don't have the FIFA name. And with the split, I feel like they're going to have to pull a rabbit out of their hat in order to continue to survive. Now, EA is a big company, and they do have some titles that are incredibly good. It's just the way that they try to gouge as much money out of their consumers as possible is just frustrating to the gaming community. And I am one of those people that is not interested in supporting a company that just doesn't give a shit about its consumers. So that's what I have to say for EA today. Let me know what you're thinking about that, and we're going to move on to the next topic. Normally, I don't talk too much about politics or anything like that, but I felt like this was an important thing to address, if briefly, and that is yet another enemy article that was released on the 9th is that Double Fine is joining Bungie in support of abortion rights in the United States. Before I continue with this, I want to say a couple of things very briefly. One, I am the sort of person that believes that people should have a choice, and there are a lot of situations and cases where abortion would be allowable in my mind. If a woman has gone through a traumatic experience, of which I'm not going to say the word, but if they go through an experience and they end up getting pregnant, they may not want the child because that would be a bad memory, maybe a trigger point. It could cause a lot of big issues. Secondly, there are a lot of women who suffer from various health problems, and if you end up getting pregnant, you could potentially pass some of those things off to your children, and you might not want to put them through that. Or potentially the woman just cannot give birth properly, where it could potentially kill them and cause additional problems, in which case having an abortion makes sense because you might not survive. And on top of that, there's no guarantee that the child would survive, even if you decide you're going to go through with it anyway. So there are cases where going through an abortion makes sense. And I fully believe that it is up to the person whether or not they want to go through that. But unfortunately, there's a lot of negative stigma because people believe that you should have children no matter what, because we still live in the dark ages according to the United States. And so while other countries have been moving forward and advancing in a way that makes sense, the US leaking the information that they might overturn Roe and Wade, which is the landmark case. But it doesn't just deal with abortion rights. It deals with a number of other cases where Roe and Wade was used as precedent to put forward different privacy laws, different trans legislations, etc. and it will extend and snowball past just abortion rates. So the problem is that people are looking at face value and they're not seeing the greater impact. And I know I came across a tweet that explained some of the other landmark cases that could be very much affected because of this potential of it being overturned. So Bungie decided to support all of their personnel and people the right to choose, and Double Fine has now stepped to the plate saying we are also going to support abortion rights in the United States. This does not apply to Canada. Canada is actually pretty open when it comes to abortion. I've looked that up. But in a tweet from May 6th, Double Fine said, "It is steadfast in our support of essential healthcare rights for all, and that the decision to overturn Roe and Wade would deny people their human rights." So the Psychonauts 2 developer urged people to donate to any organizations they can that would stand up for these rights. They tweeted, obviously, about their support for choice. And these statements follow a leaked draft of the U.S. Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe and Wade, which would make the legality of abortion the decision of each individual state and not federal law. And that is kind of huge when you consider the whole situation. And I know that that is more of a real world problem, but the fact that more video game developers are standing by the right to choose and standing by the fact that this should not be overturned. I know that there is a full-scale investigation into who leaked the documents, which is obviously a massive offense on top of it. But if that were to have passed and the Americans were not given the chance to decide whether or not they wanted that type of legislation to go through, I would be seriously pissed off if I were a U.S. citizen. Now, how PlayStation plays into this is Jim Ryan decided to also talk to the staff through an email about his stance on the abortion rights. And in that email, Jim Ryan said that he wants people to have their own opinions and choice. And unfortunately, that email did not give many staffers a lot of confidence based on how that email was written. So I feel like this particular situation was he wrote the email himself and he did not get someone to look over it, because I feel like if he had, maybe the email wouldn't have come off as completely insensitive like it did. Unfortunately, I don't have access to the Bloomberg original article to see more direct quotes from this, so I have to deal with the quotes from other places. And what is quoted from that email is, "We owe it to each other and to PlayStation's millions of users to respect differences of opinion among everyone in our internal and external communities," he said in part within the email. On the surface, this sounds good. It continues, "Respect does not equal agreement, but it is fundamental to who we are as a company and as a valued global brand." Again, on the surface, this sounds incredibly good. He is saying that even if you disagree with people, that you can still respect them, you can still be friends with them. However, some of the staff across several studios were displeased with his message after they felt trivialized by its tone, in part because the rest of the message began discussing his pets. I would really love to know how you leap off from "you're allowed to have your opinions and beliefs about abortion, but let me tell you about my pets." Like, how do you go from one topic like that to the other? I'm a person that's pretty chaotic, and how I leap from one thing to another has typically a logical transition. And I really want to know how in the hell you're going to compare your right to choose to pets. And specifically, your pets. Like, were you trying to say that they were not going to survive if you didn't stop them from having their kittens or puppies or birds, whatever kinds of pets it is that he has? I don't know. But you don't sit there and trivialize such a huge situation like that. You started off so well, and then you say that, and you're the CEO of PlayStation. Oh, it's not looking good for you, and the support or lack thereof that you're going to receive moving forward, I feel like is going to be incredibly dramatic, and I would worry for some of the people that work for PlayStation if that is your stance. Like, not in the sense of it's a bad place to work or anything, but if that's the kind of leap off point that your CEO has, I kind of wonder what other strange leap off point that you have. But that's just my personal opinion. You can take it or leave it as you may. Again, I'm glad that he is allowing people to have their own opinions, to disagree, to not cause additional chaos, but the rest of it just seems completely off the wall and insensitive, and you should have done better, in my opinion. But I leave the thought process up to you, what your thoughts are with this. I'm really curious to know. And if any of you have access to that original Bloomberg article, I'd love to see the rest of it. So let me know in Discord or in the comments. That would be great. Next, we're going to talk about YouTube. Finally, something good in gaming news, and this perhaps surprises people. I feel like it was an inevitability, but YouTube has now launched memberships, or they're launching memberships, and of course they're doing it in a beta version first. So on the 10th, this article was released, and as you can see, they are dealing with gifted memberships, and only selected channels will be available to use these gifted memberships. I'm sure that there are a number of content creators out there that can tell you about how it works. You do have to fill out a form to say that you want to take part in said beta launch of the memberships, but this acts very similar to Twitch's subscription to channels, so it's giving more content creators the ability to make money on their platform. And if for some reason Twitch does change its partnership terms and allows people to put content, dual content on Twitch and on other platforms at the same time without violating that contract, then it means that people will be able to make a lot more money with diversifying their income through YouTube streaming, through putting videos out there, through Twitch, through your Ko-fis and your Patreons and whatever other methods you have with which to make money. And you'll be able to gift these memberships with this program. So again, only available to some creators, and it does have certain requirements which are listed. You can go and take a look. I will link this in the description so you can go take a look at what you would need to have in order to enable those. And viewers also have the opt-in to be able to receive gifted memberships, which I'm kind of for. I like the idea that you can opt into having gifted memberships because, again, there are a number of persons out there who will maliciously gift memberships and then potentially take that back or charge it back in some way. There are a number of different issues that YouTube will have to deal with, and they do now have a beta version of rating other streamers to YouTube as well that people have talked about in the recent weeks. And I feel like YouTube is really setting itself up to be a good competitor to Twitch and perhaps force Twitch to change things in a way that makes more sense for creators, as opposed to giving us features that nobody asked for. And we're at a unique point in time where people have been considering moving over to YouTube or trying to get away from Twitch because of a lot of these things. And we've talked about a number of these things on Gaming News. So I think this is great. YouTube is really setting itself up to be a competitor to Twitch, and I'm all for it. I'm excited. But again, this is a conversation. I want to know what you're thinking. Do you think that gifting memberships and the raids with YouTube is a good feature or not? What do you feel are maybe some of the pitfalls of those actions? I'm just very curious to see where you stand on this, especially if you're currently a Twitch streamer. And then finally, I would like to talk about Skull and Bones. So I have one quick article here that came out earlier today, and that is that we might actually get a release date soon. Ubisoft's Skull and Bones could finally see release after a rating for the PC version of the game has been found in South Korea. According to South Korea's Game Management Committee via VGC, the rating was filed on May 12th, and it appears to indicate a game that will fall under a mature rating. A rating is usually given to a game that is complete or nearing completion, meaning the long-delayed game could finally be on its way. And this is great because it is supposed to be a competitor, if you will, to Sea of Thieves, which a lot of people really enjoy playing, although it is incredibly PvP focused. And I'm curious to see how much focus would be on the PvP element in Skull and Bones, or if there's going to be a full-on campaign that you can go through with this release. So I'm excited about this. I've been waiting to see more on this particular game for quite some time, but it has had a turbulent development period. It was announced back in 2017 with the release window being the following year, but the game has been repeatedly delayed. In 2022, they reportedly rebooted Skull and Bones to follow a live game model, and it apparently only still exists because of the deal with the Singapore government. However, the game looks like it has been ready for public testing, and gameplay leaked last month, meaning that they're really prepping to finally launch. So I'm incredibly excited to see what happens with Skull and Bones and what kind of gameplay we get out of it. I am going to watch this gameplay video again because it's been, a couple of years and I haven't been keeping up with the title in recent months and years because of other things. But I'm curious, are you guys excited for Skull and Bones? Do you think it's going to come out this year? What are your thoughts on this topic in general? I just want to know because that's the kind of person I am. But with that said, thank you so much for being part of Patreon. We do these gaming news videos every week. As long as there is news to cover, we will be here. Let me know what you're thinking about EA and the topics we covered there. Let me know how you feel about Double Fine or about PlayStation. Let me know how you feel about YouTube and membership gifting and the raids. And finally, I'm curious, are you excited for Skull and Bones? And I'm going to include one more article in the links below as well that may be exciting for some of you if you watch this video sometime around the time that it's released. Then this should still be on, and you may be able to get a good deal at this time. So, thank you very much for being here. I appreciate all of your faces. You have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video.